I'd like to introduce Jeremy Corbyn. I'd like to say a friend and a fellow person who's given us solidarity to this movement, has always stood up for the oppressed against racism. I'd like to introduce Jeremy Corbyn, MP for Islington. Thanks Wren. And in Wren we have somebody very special and very principled and very good. Wren, thanks for everything you do, have done and will do in the cause of anti-racism and solidarity. And thank you to all of you for being here today on this cold day. We're part of demonstrations that are taking place all over Europe on what is UN Anti-Racist Day. We're standing up for a different continent and a different world. We're standing up against the rise of the far right in Greece, in Austria, in Hungary, in Germany, in France and here. We are turning the tide against these people. But I tell you, there is a price that's been paid by this European-wide xenophobia and the way in which politicians and governments that should know better have conceded to the nasty racist arguments. Think for a moment, and it's a terrible moment, of those 3,000 people that died last year trying to escape tyranny, wars, poverty, discrimination and horrors to get out of Libya, to go to Lampedusa or somewhere else. They died in the Mediterranean. Frankly, the decision of the European Union to stop Mare Nostrum's search and protect process and instead setting up a European frontier force to keep these people out and allow them to drown in the sea is the most disgraceful act of inhumanity I can possibly think of. We have to recognise that the price that is paid by others, by the xenophobia of European politicians against migrant workers, leads to impoverishment, leads to exploitation and leads to ghettos all across Europe. What we need is unity, legality and respect for people. And I'm utterly appalled that most of our media seem incapable of noticing a human rights abuse on our very doorstep. The unlimited detention of many people in immigration centres at the present time and the hunger strike that's been undertaken by those people who've been so wrongfully detained in those centres. They too are victims of a whole process that allows racist laws and xenophobia to dominate the political agenda rather than a sense of collectivism, comradeship and humanity. We are here today to say something very, very different than those people. I don't know how this election is going to pan out, but I agree with what Diane said earlier. For those politicians that think you can defeat UKIP or the BNP or any other racist organisation by conceding their arguments, you can't out UKIP. You can't out BNP the BNP. You have to raise the argument that the way forward is to recognise what our society is, bring people together and treat racism and racists for what they are: wrong, unacceptable and not welcome in our society. And I conclude with this point. I'm going into this election campaign and I'm looking forward to it, because I'm going to say to everybody that says to me the problem is to do with immigration, I will say the problem is, when did a xenophobe ever build a house? When did a xenophobe ever employ a nurse? When can xenophobia defend our public services? No. The argument is bring people together. The argument is bring people together in unity through trade unions, through communities and other things. Build the houses we need. Redistribute the wealth to those that need it. Defend the hospitals and the principles of the National Health Service. And take heart and hope from the young people of Britain that don't recognise the racist election campaigns of the 60s and 70s, that don't recognise that as their past, but instead recognise those who stood up against the Nazis in Cable Street in London in the 1970s who stand up every day against Islamophobia, anti-Semitism or any other form of racism every day. The way forward, my friends, is unity, is respect, is decency, but above all, is a collective solution to our problems, not blaming somebody else. Thank you.